Is another $2,000 stimulus check on the horizon? The economic warning signs are flashing, and history suggests it could be even larger. Today, we're breaking down what Social Security, SSDI, and SSI recipients need to know right now. In this video, you'll discover the current status of a potential fourth stimulus check, why targeted assistance to fixed-income groups makes economic sense, and the key indicators that signal when new stimulus money might be coming. We'll also explore the historical patterns that suggest the next check could exceed $2,000. Information you won't want to miss. Stay with us until the end to discover exactly what financial experts are predicting and what steps you should take to prepare. Welcome to Financial Area, your trusted source for economic updates that impact your wallet. If you find this information helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for weekly financial insights. As we dive into the possibility of a new stimulus check, it's clear that certain Americans are feeling the economic pressure more than others. Social Security, SSI, and SSDI recipients living on fixed incomes are particularly vulnerable as they struggle to keep up with today's rising costs. These Americans have limited ability to increase their income through additional work or investment strategies, making them especially dependent on timely government assistance. The recent wave of store closures across the country isn't just bad news for shoppers. It's a glaring indicator of economic distress that policymakers can't ignore. Major retailers shutting their doors signals that consumer spending is down. And when consumers aren't spending, the economic ripple effects can be severe. This retail contraction provides compelling evidence that many Americans simply lack the financial resources to maintain normal purchasing patterns. When we examine the economic impact of stimulus payments, the data shows that targeting fixed-income Americans provides significantly better returns than broad distribution. Why? Because these recipients typically spend the money immediately on essential needs rather than saving it. This immediate spending stimulates local economies, creates demand for goods and services, and supports jobs, all without triggering the inflation concerns that come with wider distribution. A targeted approach also addresses the specific hardships facing our most vulnerable citizens. While the general economy may show mixed signals, those on Social Security, SSDI, and SSI face unmistakable challenges as their fixed benefits struggle to cover basic necessities in today's economy. Focusing relief efforts on these Americans isn't just compassionate, it's economically sound policy that directs resources where they'll do the most immediate good. Behind the scenes, conversations about targeted stimulus assistance have been gaining traction in congressional committees. While mainstream media coverage has been limited, several lawmakers have been building support for supplemental payments specifically designed for Social Security recipients. These discussions build on precedents established during previous economic downturns when supplemental assistance was provided to those on fixed incomes. The timeline for potential legislation remains fluid. But historically, targeted relief measures have moved more quickly through Congress than broader stimulus packages. This accelerated timeline reflects both the urgent needs of recipients and the smaller budgetary impact of targeted programs. Some analysts suggest that if economic indicators continue to deteriorate, we could see movement on this issue within the next legislative session. Looking back at the history of stimulus payments reveals a fascinating pattern that few Americans have noticed. During each major economic downturn over the past 2 decades, stimulus check amounts have essentially doubled. In 2000, eligible Americans received roughly $300 in stimulus payments. By the 2008 financial crisis, that amount increased to $600. When the pandemic struck in 2020, the first round of stimulus checks jumped to $1,200. This doubling trend suggests that if another stimulus becomes necessary, Americans could potentially see payments around $2,400, significantly higher than the $2,000 figure currently being discussed. This historical pattern isn't merely coincidental. Each economic crisis has brought more severe disruptions requiring stronger fiscal responses. The increasing payment amounts reflect both inflation and the growing recognition among policymakers that meaningful stimulus requires substantial direct payments to consumers. For Social Security, SSI, and SSDI recipients, this trend is particularly relevant as they typically receive the full stimulus amount due to their income levels. The implementation timelines of previous stimulus programs offer valuable insights into what might happen with a fourth payment. During the 2020 pandemic response, the time between legislation approval and the first deposits hitting accounts was approximately 2 weeks for those with direct deposit information on file with the IRS. However, Social Security recipients who weren't required to file tax returns often experienced delays of 4 to 6 weeks, a critical detail for those planning their finances around potential relief. Previous recessions demonstrate that stimulus checks typically follow specific economic indicators rather than political calendars. In both 2008 and 2020, rising unemployment claims and consecutive quarters of GDP contraction triggered bipartisan support for direct payments. The current economic situation hasn't yet reached those threshold levels, but the accelerating store closures and slowing job growth suggest we may be approaching similar conditions that prompted previous stimulus actions. The effectiveness of past stimulus efforts provides compelling evidence for their continuation. Studies of the 2020 CARES Act payments found that each dollar of stimulus generated approximately $1.50 in economic activity, an impressive multiplier effect. For Social Security recipients specifically, research showed even higher local economic impacts, as these individuals typically spent their payments immediately on essential needs within their communities, creating a virtuous cycle of economic activity. Financial analysts remain divided on the likelihood of a fourth stimulus payment, though consensus is building around the need for targeted assistance. Major investment firms like Goldman Sachs have recently adjusted their economic forecast to include higher recession probabilities, a key precursor to stimulus action. Some experts suggest that rather than waiting for full-blown recession indicators, lawmakers might proactively approve targeted payments to vulnerable groups, including Social Security recipients, as a preventative measure to avoid deeper economic contraction. Inflation since 2020 has eroded the purchasing power of fixed income substantially, with Social Security cost of living adjustments failing to keep pace with real-world price increases. Several prominent economists have calculated that a stimulus payment would need to be at least $2,240 today to match the purchasing power of the $1,200 payments issued in 2020. This inflation-adjusted figure aligns remarkably well with the historical doubling pattern, lending further credibility to predictions of a payment in the $2,400 range if economic conditions continue to deteriorate. Among all economic indicators that influence stimulus decisions, the monthly non-farm payroll report stands as perhaps the most significant barometer that both policymakers and economists watch closely. This comprehensive employment report, released on the first Friday of each month by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, provides crucial insights into job creation, unemployment rates, and wage growth across the economy. For Social Security, SSDI, and SSI recipients monitoring the potential for another stimulus check, understanding this report is essential. When monthly job creation falls below 100,000 for 2 consecutive months, historically this has triggered serious discussions about economic intervention. The unemployment threshold that activated previous stimulus measures hovers around 6%, significantly higher than current levels. However, many economists argue that the official unemployment rate fails to capture the true economic distress, as it doesn't count discouraged workers who've stopped looking for jobs. This hidden unemployment is particularly relevant for evaluating the need for targeted assistance to Social Security recipients, as many older Americans have permanently exited the workforce during recent economic turbulence, making the headline unemployment figure appear healthier than the reality experienced by fixed-income households. Interpreting these economic numbers requires looking beyond the headlines. When planning your finances, pay particular attention to the labor force participation rate and the employment-to-population ratio, which provide a more comprehensive picture of employment health than the unemployment rate alone. These metrics have historically served as early warning signals for economic downturns, often declining months before official recession declarations. Currently, these indicators show concerning weakness, particularly among older workers, suggesting potential stimulus action may be warranted sooner rather than later. The accelerating pace of retail store closures represents another crucial economic indicator that correlates strongly with stimulus decision-making. Major retailers have announced over 2,500 store closures in recent months, a dramatic increase from previous years. These closures aren't merely business failures, they're powerful signals about consumer spending capacity that directly influence congressional thinking on economic intervention. When Americans lack disposable income, retailers suffer, creating a negative feedback loop that historically has only been broken through direct government stimulus. Monthly retail sales data provides perhaps the most immediate window into consumer financial health. When this figure declines for 3 consecutive months, as we've recently witnessed, it typically accelerates congressional action on relief measures. For Social Security beneficiaries, these retail metrics are doubly important, as they both signal the likelihood of stimulus assistance and indicate potential price reductions as retailers compete more aggressively for limited consumer dollars. Monitoring the Census Bureau's monthly retail report can provide valuable advance notice of both economic trends and potential government response. While awaiting potential relief, Social Security, SSDI, and SSI recipients should take several proactive steps. First, ensure your direct deposit information is current with the Social Security Administration to avoid payment delays. Second, sign up for email updates from both ssa.gov and irs.gov, the only official sources for stimulus information. Third, review your budget to identify non-essential expenses that could be temporarily reduced if stimulus legislation faces delays. Many community action agencies also offer emergency assistance programs specifically designed for fixed-income seniors during economic downturns. Contact your local office to determine eligibility. As discussions about potential stimulus payments intensify, so too do the scams targeting vulnerable recipients. Remember that legitimate government agencies will never contact you by phone, email, or text message requesting personal information or payment to process your stimulus check. All official communications about stimulus programs come through postal mail, on official letterhead, or through secure message centers in your established government online accounts. If you receive unsolicited communications about stimulus payments, report them immediately to the FTC at reportfraud.ftc.gov to protect yourself and other potential victims from financial exploitation.